Hey guys, my name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up. In the month of February, I read a total of 11 books, which amounted to this many pages. I read 3 romance novels this month, 3 contemporary fiction books this month, 2 historical fictions, 2 thrillers, and 1 non-fiction book. This month I had 1 5-star rating, I had 5 4-star ratings, 4 3-star ratings, and only 1 2-star rating, so it was actually on the higher end. As far as male versus female authors go, I had 8 female authors this month and only 3 male authors. As far as my goals for 2019 go, I was not able to get to my reread this month. But as far as my book of the month goals, I was able to read 2 of my book of the month selections that I got this month. Also this month I did participate in the contemporary-a-thon, which was really fun, and I'll link down the vlogs from that below if you missed those, but that was a really fun week. I also participated in my own reading after 10 experiment this month, which also contributed to how much I was able to read, and so I'll also put the video link in the description for that if you missed that. It was like a video of me trying to read every single night in a week after 10 p.m. Let's just jump into what I read. So the first book I managed to read in February was A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne. This was one of my book of the month picks from the end of last year, I believe in November, and this is a historical fiction novel that's mainly about this guy named Maurice Swift, who is this very charming, young, and handsome guy who wants to be a writer, but he doesn't really have any talent, and so he's kind of trying to like work his way to the top of like becoming this huge successful author by kind of like being manipulative and being kind of a shady person. This book was very interesting. I did love the writing because John Boyne wrote one of my favorite books of all time, The Heart's Invisible Furies, and so that's mainly why I wanted to read this book, just because he's such a great author. I was actually really hooked into the story because this story is divided into like 3 or 4 different sections, and then each section is from the point of view of a different person who Maurice tried to manipulate, basically. And so I was very invested in the first part of this book. Like, I thought the first part of this book was looking to be a 5-star read for me. Like, it was very interesting. And then like parts 2 and 3 of this book, I started to like lose interest because I felt like it was starting to be very like repetitive with his ways. And by the ending, I felt like it did get a little bit dramatic and like it wasn't as interesting as the beginning was, so I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. The second book I read this month was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I finally got to this book. This is another historical fiction, and this one follows this girl named Kaya, who is what they refer to as the marsh girl because she lives in the marsh because her family has pretty much abandoned her, and so she grows up in this marsh. In alternating chapters we get Kaya's story, and then we hear about this boy Chase Andrews in the town who was recently murdered. Police are investigating into the death of Chase Andrews, and the whole town is blaming his death on the marsh girl. Really enjoyed it, but I honestly think I went into it with way too high of expectations because I've just heard from everyone that like this was their favorite book of 2018, or like this was an easy 5-star read. So I think I went in with my expectations being a little too high, because if I had gone in not really knowing what this book was about, I'm sure I would have enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I did. But since I went in with such high expectations, it didn't really like quite live up to them in my mind. I did really enjoy the writing in this book. I thought the writing was absolutely gorgeous, and I really did relate to Kaya and her sense of like loneliness and the way she describes loneliness. I just thought it was really beautiful and really relatable. But as far as the things that I didn't really like about this book, I mean, I didn't super love the like romance in this book between Kaya and a few of these boys, and like there was like this love triangle going on, and it felt very like YA to me because Kaya's just so young and so naive. And I do really love the ending of this book though. I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. Like, it's still really good, it's just not as good as I was thinking it would be. Right, the third book I read this month was The Winter Sister by Megan Collins. This was one of my book of the month selections from this month. So it follows this girl whose sister was murdered 16 years ago, and they never found out who was responsible for the murder, but she's always had this suspicion that it was her sister's boyfriend at the time, who was questioned and then released, and he never got charged with anything. And now this is about her going back to her hometown because her mom is sick, and while she's back in her hometown, she discovers some new things about her sister's case, and she goes on this investigative journey into finding out what actually happened to her sister. I thought this story was actually pretty good. Don't get me wrong, it starts off pretty slow. It takes a while to get into this. Like, I wasn't really invested until after about 100 pages or so, but once you give the story enough time to get going, I was freaking hooked into this, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. The end reveal, okay, the end did get a little bit dramatic and cheesy for my taste, but I still had a really fun time reading this. Like, I thought it was very entertaining and surprising, and yeah, so I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. The fourth book I read this month was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. Thank you so much to Gallery Books for sending me an arc of this. This comes out in May. This is Christina Lauren's latest romance novel. If you didn't know, they're one of my favorite authors, so getting this book was a huge surprise and just like amazing. So this book follows this girl named Olive, who is a twin sister named Amy, who's getting married. Like, the night of their wedding, Amy's entire wedding party gets food poisoning, like severe food poisoning, and they aren't going to be able to go on their honeymoon. They offer the honeymoon to Olive and the guy that her twin sister's marrying's brother, Ethan, who's this guy that Olive just can't stand because they just hate each other. We get this amazing hate-to-love romance on a honeymoon in Hawaii, and she has to pretend that she's her sister because they won the honeymoon in like a giveaway, and so she has to pretend to be her twin sister on the honeymoon, and then Ethan has to pretend to be his brother because they have the same last name, go on this honeymoon together, and they have to pretend to be married even though they hate each other, and it's my favorite thing in the world. Not only because this has some of my favorite tropes ever, like hate to love romance, slow burn romance, and fake relationship because they have to pretend to be married. Oh my gosh, this book was loads of fun. It was absolutely hilarious. Like, Christina Lauren's writing is just so effortlessly funny. Like, they are just so good at writing, and these characters just feel so real to me and so likable, and like Olive is one of my favorite female protagonists from Christina Lauren. Like, I absolutely adored her, and Ethan is just so great as well. Like, this is probably my favorite hate to love romance since The Hating Game. Like, I just loved it so much. And yeah, this was my only 5-star read this month. Like, it was absolutely fantastic. Alright, so the next book I was able to get to this month is 99% Mine by Sally Thorne, and this is another romance novel. This is the second novel from the author of The Hating Game, which again, I just said is like one of my favorite books of all time. Obviously, I was highly anticipating this second book that she just came out with, and unfortunately, this book was absolute trash. This was my only 2-star rating this month. I really didn't like this book. It's a romance that follows this girl who has this heart condition, and she has short hair. I don't know how many times it reminds you that she has short hair. So yeah, she has this twin brother named Jamie who, like, they're not talking at the moment, and then she has this childhood crush slash best friend slash it's Jamie's best friend named Tom, and she's just like obsessed with this guy Tom. That's like the main love interest in this book, is this guy Tom, but then Tom has this girlfriend or fiance or whatever. Oh my god, this okay, first of all, the writing was so weird and botchy, and it was like they had all these inside jokes that you don't know anything about just because they're childhood friends apparently, so like they understand each other, but like as a reader, like you don't get any explanation on any of their like inside jokes, or like it was just so confusing to read this book. And the dialogue in this book was absolutely boring as shit because you didn't get any explanation on why they were like what they were even talking about half the time, and I just feel like there was absolutely no chemistry between these two. Like, I was bored out of my mind reading this. Like, there was just so much shit I didn't care about. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I just really wasn't a fan, and it makes me sad because I had such high expectations for this because it's Sally Thorne. The next book I was able to read this month is On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. This is another one of my Book of the Month selections from this month. I was highly anticipating because Angie Thomas wrote The Hate You Give, which is one of my favorite books of all time, and this book was really great. This is a young adult contemporary about this girl named Bree who wants to become this huge famous rap star. I personally am a pretty big fan of rap music, but I'm not really a big fan of like freestyle rap music the way that this book is about. I feel like there was a lot going on in this book, like almost too much going on for me to really grasp, but I did really like Bree as a main character. I thought she was fierce and sassy and just amazing. I did love the message in this book. It did feel a lot like The Hate U Give, in the sense that it's really calling you out on your white privilege. I feel like it's so like relevant and important to discuss. But yeah, I thought this story was really great. I don't think it was as good as The Hate U Give, obviously, because The Hate U Give is just so freaking iconic, but I still gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Like, I still had a really great time reading this. I actually really loved reading her little rap verses when she was rapping. Like, I just think she was really clever and really like on top of her shit, so it was a good time. The next book I was able to read this month is I Owe You One by Sophie Kinsella, and this one is an adult contemporary book. It follows this girl named Fixie who kind of like runs her family's business. It's kind of a story about her family business and her family, and then it's also kind of a romance. It's kind of like a love triangle romance almost between this guy that was like her childhood crush, who's now this like huge actor in Hollywood, and then also this other guy who she meets randomly when she like saves the day for him, and then he gives her an I Owe You One. It's basically what the story's about. Sorry, I don't know how to explain this. It's very confusing. I thought that this story was okay. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Like, it was really cute, but it was also very like overly written, I feel like, because this book is pretty long for what the story's about. I just feel like this author like over explains every little thing that I don't really need to know, and I never felt like I truly connected with any of the characters in any way. It was just like reading a story about a cute family, but I never really felt anything. So yeah, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was alright. The next book I was able to read this month is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, and oh my god, you guys, I was finally able to get to this book. I've been wanting to read it since like October last year. Unfortunately, my copy of it got lost in the mail and I had to get refunded on Amazon because it never came. So I ended up just getting the ebook because I was like, I cannot wait any longer. I need to read this. This book is described as a thriller. The genre is a thriller. I don't know if I would necessarily call it a thriller though. It's about this group of theater students who are studying Shakespeare, and you know right off the bat that one of them is murdered. It's divided into like 5 different acts, which are like sections, but since it's like kind of written in the style of a play, it's divided into acts, and before each act we get to see the main character Oliver, who's being released from prison 10 years after whatever the incident was that happened. It's very, very much like The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I know it gets a lot of comparison to that, but there's a reason for it, because it is very similar. Like, these very prestigious, kind of snotty, maybe college students who all get a little too close and their egos kind of like go against each other, you know, and then like one of them is murdered as a result of it. It's very much like The Secret History because of that, but I actually liked this book a little bit more than The Secret History because, oh my god, it was so beautifully written. And like, this is by far one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read. Like, it was just so atmospheric, dark and moody and like haunting, and just, oh my god, it was so beautiful to read. And I ended up staying up until like 2 in the morning both nights that I read this book just because like I couldn't stop reading it. Like, it was just so interesting. It wasn't like quite a 5-star book for me because there were definitely some issues that I had with it. The main reason why I didn't end up giving it 5 stars was because it took me a really long time to get into this book. Like, it took me over 100 pages to really get invested, but I really did enjoy this one, and I definitely think this is one you should check out. So the 9th book I was able to read this month is A Heart and a Body in the World by Deb Calleti. This is a young adult contemporary novel. I picked this book up because I had heard nothing but good things from Chelsea on her channel and Mel to the Any, Melanie. She just read it during Contemporary-a-thon and she said it was amazing, and so I felt really inspired to just like go and get this book from Barnes & Noble and read it. And it's been a long time since I've just kind of impulsively bought a book and just read it, you know? Like, it's kind of a spoiler what this book is about, but let's just say there's a trigger warning and a spoilery warning for this really dark and sad thing that this book is about, which I'm not going to tell you, but if you do want to know what this book is about and you don't really care, it's not really a spoiler, but it kind of is because you don't find out until the end what exactly it is. But I'll put the link in the description for my Goodreads review that has the like spoiler tag warning on there, so you can click on that if you want to see. But yeah, basically it's about this girl who something very horrific and terrible happens to her. She decides that she's going to run across the country from Seattle to Washington, D.C. to do something about it. Really was depressing and sad. I actually related a lot to this main character. I related to her in the sense that like she's just always overly cautious and feels like she has to be really, really nice to people, even though it's kind of awkward. Like she can't say no basically, and I'm definitely that way as well. Like even if she doesn't want to do things, like she'll just be polite and say yes anyway, just because she's trying to be polite, and then it'll put her into these really awkward situations. I just related to her so much, and so that was definitely a huge reason why I loved this book so much. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars though, and the only reason why it wasn't a 5-star book for me was because some of the parts in this book are so slow, and you can definitely skim through some parts of this book, because the majority of this book, like 90% of this book, is just her running across the United States. So it's a lot of her being like, I'm so tired, my feet hurt, I'm running across, like this is what I'm looking at in the scenery where I'm running right now. And there are some flashback chapters as she's running to see like what happened exactly in her past. It's like making her run and making her do this. Really enjoyed this one. I do think it's very important and very relevant right now, especially in America. Just really tragic and sad and beautiful and amazing. So I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars. Alright, the 10th book I read this month is Lie With Me by Philippe Besson. Thank you to Scribner for sending me an ARC. This book comes out April 30th. This is a male-male romance that takes place in the 1980s in France. And this is comparing itself. It says The French Brokeback Mountain on the back of this, and I know a lot of people have been comparing this book to Call Me By Your Name, so it's definitely got some big names associated with it. This book was translated by Molly Ringwald, who's the actress from The Breakfast Club, which is freaking insane and really cool. This is a very short and sweet book. It's only about 150 pages. I thought this book was really cute, but I didn't really think it brought anything new to the table as far as romances go. It was like, it just reminded me a lot of other romances like Brokeback Mountain and Call Me By Your Name that I think are a lot better. But this book was very beautifully written, like I will give it that. It definitely had some very lyrical, beautiful writing. I didn't super connect with the relationship though in this book and with these characters, because this book was really cute. I don't think it's anything like groundbreaking though. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Alright, and the last book I read this month is Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. This is the only nonfiction book that I read this month. Matt Haig wrote my favorite book that I read in 2018 called The Humans, and this is one of his nonfiction books that talks about his struggle with depression and anxiety, and he talks about how he almost killed himself. It's a very, very beautiful and powerful nonfiction book. Half of this book is his story and his journey to like overcoming his depression, and then some of this book is facts about depression and anxiety, and then some of this book is like lists of like things that can make you feel hopeful, reasons to stay alive. But I really like some of the points he makes about how like the world is increasingly designed to depress us. The whole strategy of like marketing and business is like trying to make you feel like you're missing out on something if you don't have whatever it is. And so he's like, maybe to be truly in tune with the modern world means anxiety is inevitable. I think about our generation of, you know, younger people, and I think we probably experience more anxiety and depression than any generation that has come before us. And so it's like, maybe that's just what it means to be like in tune with the modern world, like the things that are going on. But yeah, this book just made me think a lot, and I feel like it had some really beautiful moments and quotes, and Matt Haig is just an exceptional writer. Like, he's just so good, and I want to read all of his books. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I just thought it was really, really great and really sad, but I think if you've ever experienced depression or anxiety or are currently going through something, I highly recommend reading this book. Like, it was very hopeful to me, and it was very uplifting, and I think it just has a great message, and it's very informative about these things, you know? Those are all of the books I was able to read in February. Let me know what your thoughts are. How many books were you able to get to this month? What was your favorite book that you were able to get to this month? I read a lot of really great and important books this month, but I am absolute trash for Christina Lauren. Like, I just love them so much, and this book was definitely my favorite that I've read this month. There were definitely some very memorable reads for me and very important reads for me. Like, the topics discussed in these 3 books are just very important to me. But yeah, so those are all of the things. So let me know your thoughts if you've read any of these books that I read this month. Let me know what your thoughts are on them. I'm sorry to be disappointing some of you that I didn't absolutely love Where the Crawdads Sing, because I know so many of you love that book and have recommended that book to me, and I still really enjoyed it, and I'm sorry I didn't absolutely love it the way a lot of you seem to. But it's all good, you know, we all have different tastes. I will see you you guys soon with a new video. Thanks for watching as always. Bye.